Good evening and welcome to our NSS session for your second assignment. So I'm sure you guys are super excited that the second assignment is already upon us, because that means it's not long to go and then the semester will be over. Guys, I'm not going to put my camera on just yet because I've got load shedding. The lights are supposed to come on now at 6 o'clock. And when they do, then I'll switch my camera on, because I've just got a lamp on at the moment. So it's it'll be basically pitch dark when if I put the light on, or it'll look super spooky. So I'll just hang on for that for a bit. I just wanted to check quickly, 17th of May today. So also just to remind you guys where we are in terms of the pacer, that believe it or not, this week that we're in now is actually week 12 of the semester, which is officially the last week of the 12 academic weeks that you guys have got, during which time you are supposed to cover all of your learning units in order to cover them all and then prepare for your second assignment and then the exam. So it just shows you we are almost at the end, getting towards the end. So keep going, those of you who have been nice and consistent. You are nearly there, so don't give up anytime soon. Okay, so I know everybody is battling under load shedding constraints in terms of whether they've got electricity or not. So I'll try and keep it brief and not too long. But at the same time, I'll try and give you enough information to be helpful for the assignment. And then also don't forget, this has been recorded, so I'll upload the recording. So if you miss anything, you'll be able to pick that up tomorrow. And then also the 2 documents that I use in the session this evening, I'll also upload for you onto Learn. So you'll be able to download those and print them out and use them when you are busy working on your assignment. So this document that's on the screen at the moment, this is the one that I call the assignment, or refer to as the assignment brief. And I'm not going to go through this because you've seen it already for assignment 1. It's got all the same information on it. But guys, it is super important information. And I'm still surprised at how many students ask me questions regarding what is detailed for you on this brief. The reason that I do the brief is basically because it covers FAQs. So, and also technical information about the upload of your assignment, so that you've got all that information in one place and you don't have to run around trying to look for it at that last minute when you on the last day when your assignment is due. So just a reminder, this assignment is due on the 24th of May, which is exactly in 1 week's time, next Wednesday, 9 p.m. And remember, the assignment must be uploaded before 9 p.m. 9 p.m. is the cutoff. Just a note as well, you'll see at the top here, I've put that assignment 2 covers the first 6 learning units. So yes, you have read that correctly. It covers from learning unit 1 through to learning unit 6. So even though the first couple of learning units were covered in the first assignment, because this is accounting and everything that we do and learn is a foundation for what comes next, there is nothing in accounting that, especially this first accounting 1A, you are basically being tested on all of the learning units all the time, because everything is building on what came before. So your first assignment was basically on the first 4 learning units. And then for this one, in addition to those first 4, you've also got questions on learning unit 5, recording credit and sundry transactions, and learning unit 6, inventory systems. So those 2 have been added to what you've already done. Okay, so that's enough about that document. It is will be, excuse me, will be uploaded for you. You'll have it available. And please do use it because there is important information on it. Okie dokie, let's then go to the lesson plan. Okay, so remember this document is called the lesson plan, and this is the document where I've got some information for you question by question. Really just to give you hints and tips on where in your textbook to find the relevant information for each question in the assignment. And I always try and give you at least some examples and questions in the textbook that you can go to study that are then similar to the assignment questions, or at least contain the information that you need. And that's just to help you from a time point of view, so that you're not flipping backwards and forwards through your textbook looking for information. But remember, it doesn't mean that anything that I haven't listed on this document is not important. Where I have listed information or page numbers or questions, etc., these are just highlights. But every single thing in your textbook is important, particularly when it comes to preparing for the exams. Okay. So again, 24th of May is your due date. And very NB, guys, remember always that you are tertiary academic students now, so referencing is always required, even though this is a numeric module. If you've got a question in one of your assignments that requires you to write paragraphs or explain something or describe something or define something, you have to reference that. Okay. And again, I'm not going to go into the whole referencing scenario too much. You guys have had plenty of training and workshops on referencing. You've got all that information on the IE website and on Learn with each of your modules as well. So it's very important you start getting used to that, because you are required to reference, and you will lose marks if you don't reference where necessary. Always show your workings. That's very important. Marks are allocated to those, and if you don't show your workings and you've made mistakes, then I can't give you any method marks, which is a good way to earn marks, particularly in accounting, where often there's calculations that you've got to do in order to get to an answer that you then use in a question somewhere. Make sure that you read the required very carefully in each of your questions, so that you make sure that you are answering exactly what was asked for. Leave no room for interpretation. You must do exactly what they've asked for in the required on the question paper. Okay, so then let's go to question 1. I will put the question paper itself up on the screen in a minute, so you can look at the questions. But this is just a quick, brief indication of what you should look at, places to go that will help you with this particular question. Okay, just give me 1 second. Okay. So question 1 is on Learning Unit 1 and Learning Unit 2. So that's your introduction to business and bookkeeping and the accounting equation and the double entry system. So it's 25 marks, and it covers those 2 learning units. So it's made up of, we've got from question 1.1 through to question 1.4, made up of 4 different parts. I've just listed over here, these are all the important content areas in your textbook that you need to have mastered in order to get all of these questions correct. Finally, my lights have come back on. So let me just quickly put my video on for you. It won't take long. And then as you can see on the at the bottom over here, I have made the note, please make sure that question 1.1 to 1.3, those questions must be referenced. So you need to reference each of the questions separately in text if necessary, or otherwise underneath each question, whatever the paragraph you've written, you put the reference there. And then don't forget, if you have used references, there must be a bibliography or reference page right at the end that lists all of your references. And it's absolutely fine, guys. Just because you need to reference doesn't mean you need to go all over the internet to find answers. Everything you need should be in your textbook. It's absolutely fine to only use your textbook if that is sufficient. These textbooks, your EDGE textbooks written for these modules, are excellent, and they've been purpose written for your curriculum. So there's nothing extraneous in any of these chapters, and also there's nothing that's left out. Every single one of your learning objectives is covered from A to Z in the textbook, and there's also nothing in the textbook that is just superfluous that you don't need. So you need to cover your textbook front cover to back cover. Okay. So these parts you'll be familiar with already from the first assignment: users and uses of financial information, different fields of accounting. Both of those were covered in your first assignment as well. Then on page 69, this is an often skipped over or forgotten little section, the paragraph on the introduction to inventory systems, where the textbook first introduces you to the concept of perpetual and periodic inventory systems and what the difference between the two, what the differences are. Then these next 4 sections, okay, accounting equation, and this is relevant to question 1.4 because you have to again analyze transactions in a table. So you need to make sure you understand the accounting equation. The left-hand side of the equation must equal the right-hand side of the equation. And then the different elements in the equation are assets and liabilities, which are covered in page 31. The proprietary accounts, which is owner's equity, covered on page 38. And then profit, which is calculated by taking income minus expenses, that's covered on page 39. And remember, your profit is added to, sorry, I'm just trying to pick this up. Proprietary accounts plus the profit for the current year makes up your owner's equity. Okay, so assets is on the left-hand side of the accounting equation, equals, and then on the right-hand side, we've got owner's equity plus liabilities. Then don't forget, revise again your rules of double entry on page 46. And these cover the rules for the 6 different account types. So your 6 different account types are assets and liabilities, capital and drawings, which is your proprietary accounts, and income and expenses. So the rules of double entry tell us for those 6 types of account, when does the account increase and when does the account decrease. So remember the dead click that I've gone over with you guys before in collabs. Always remember that. It makes it super easy to not make mistakes with your accounting equation. Then have a look at example 2.9 on page 48. That will help you as well, show you exactly what you should do. And then I've always reminded you, page 53 in the textbooks, that chart of accounts is an easy, quick cheat sheet just to go there to that one place where a bunch of different account names are already sorted for you under our 6 different account types. So that is just a place that will help you to quickly find an account. And then question 2.7 and question 2.9, those are 2 example questions that you can go and have a look at. the transactions and the solutions in analyzing transactions, which is exactly what you've got to do in question 1.4. So just the reminder, question 1.1 to 1.3 must be referenced, and question 1.4, please follow the instructions carefully when you are filling in that table. They give you an example, so carefully have a look at the example and make sure that you do exactly the same. And don't forget, it's very important that you indicate a plus sign or a minus sign in front of each amount that you write down in the assets, owners, equity, or liabilities column, because you must indicate to me, are you increasing or decreasing assets, liabilities, etc. Okay, if you just write the rand value down, you'll only get half of the marks. You must indicate whether it's increasing or decreasing. The plus or minus, as per the example on your book, must be there. Okay, any questions so far? Whoopsie. All right, I am talking quite quickly, but that's also just so that the recording isn't too long. And remember, you can stop me at any time to ask questions. You can just put your hand up at the bottom of the screen so I can see that you want to say something, or otherwise just type it in the chat. Completely informal, guys. Remember, always you're welcome to ask questions or query anything as we go along. So in this assignment, each of the questions are worth 25 marks. So our question 2, this is learning units 2, 3, and 4. So again, LU2 accounting equation, and your very favorite chapter of all, LU3 VAT and source documents. And remember, learning unit 3 is the chapter that contains all of our calculations for our VAT calculations, as well as our markup and gross profit calculations. And then we're also covering LU4 cash transactions in this question. So basically, question 1 and 2 of this assignment will take us to the end of learning unit 4, which are the same learning units that you had in your first assignment. Okay, so for question 2.1, the following are important sections. So they're asking you in a slightly different manner to how they've asked you before in question 2.1, where they have given you a balance or a total, and they have written next to it an element, and then you have to mark on the table, tick either the correct or the incorrect column. Remember, only one of those columns must be ticked. And then if the element that they have got on the question is incorrect, in the last third column, you have to then write down what the correct element is. Okay, so I don't know why they've headed that first column balance or total, because basically that is an account. So I would have said that first column is headed account or account name, general ledger account name. And then you need to correctly identify which element it should be. So again, you're going to go to some similar places. The accounting equation, the assets and liabilities description is on page 26. Proprietary accounts, drawings and capital, page 38, and the income and expenses on page 39. And then remember also the chart that I've just mentioned on page 53 will be very helpful for this question. And then question 2.6 in your textbook, the textbook question 2.6 is an example of a list of transactions being categorized accordingly. So let me just see. I know there was a very good question. I just want to check if I gave you that number. Sorry, guys, I just quickly want to check. There was oh yes, no, that is the question. So definitely question 2.6. Have that open when you are doing your question 2.1 to help you, and your chart of accounts on page 53. Then for question 2.2, this is quite a nice question again. Also, they've asked you in a different way to how they asked you in the first assignment. So it's going to get you thinking and again revising these first 4 chapters. This one is on cash book receipts. And again, they've given you a completed cash book receipts in your question paper, and you are required to draw up the table with those 3 columns that they have at the bottom. And you have to fill in each of those. So, okay, day is just the column that you're going to use to identify which transaction you are discussing. And then we've got 3 headings: transaction description, source document, and original duplicate. So those are the headings of the 3 columns you have to fill in. So for each transaction, you have to fill in all 3 columns. Please make sure that you don't miss some information. So the transaction description is a brief description of that transaction. In other words, as if it was a textbook transaction that they were describing and then saying to you, okay, this is a transaction, now go and enter it into the cash book. They've just reversed that, and they've given you the completed transaction in the cash book, and they want you to now describe the transaction. And then what would the source document be for that transaction, and would it be an original source document or a duplicate source document? So this information you will find on recording cash transactions on page 106 in your textbooks. Remember, these are all textbook references. Page 111, cash journals. Then your cash book receipts structure, and the key to the structure is given to you on page 112. And I've put here that this is very important because that structure and the key to the structure tells you exactly what information belongs in each of the columns in our cash book. So if you know exactly what the correct description is for that column in the cash book, it's going to assist you better to understand what transaction has been entered in these 5 different transactions that they've given you. And then have a look at example 4.1, drafting cash journals, because there again you will have a page of descriptions of transactions with the transaction also entered into the cash journal. So you'll be able to have a look at some examples of descriptions there, which should help you. And then introducing journals on page 107, that is where the textbook gives you a list of source document types that will be entered into each specific journal. So again, if you go and have a look there, you'll also get some hints and tips as to, for that last column, the last 2 columns, what is the source document type, and is it an original or a duplicate? And then I've just made a note at the bottom. Take note that there are 3 parts to the question for each transaction, just meaning that all 3 columns must be filled in for each transaction. Okay, any questions with question 2? Guys are good with that one. Okay, so then we go on to question 3, also for 25 marks. And this question covers unit 3. Okay, cool, Emma, that's good. Question 3, question 3, learning unit 3, VAT and source documents. again, which is such an important chapter. Make sure that you know that Learning Unit 3 backwards and forwards by the time it comes to the exam. And then also Learning Unit 5, credit and sundry transactions. So Learning Unit 5 is an assignment 2 chapter where you haven't been tested on that before. We only went as far as the cash transactions in the first one. So question 3 consists of 5 parts, question 3.1 all the way through to question 3.5. And some of these are practical questions where you have to write down or do some calculations, and some of them are theory questions. So again, just make sure for the theory questions for question 3 that you reference them. So this list over here, following in your textbooks at the top, is in general for question 3. These are the places that you'll need to go to make sure that you've studied up and you understand these before you tackle the questions. So for this is in your textbook part 3.1 and part 3.2. What is VAT? How does the VAT system work, etc. on page 77, and your VAT calculations on page 93. Your markup calculations on page 94. These calculations, super important, and hopefully by now you guys have mastered them and practiced them enough that you are comfortable with doing them. And then obviously your VAT calculations, question 3.6 is a good question to use to practice VAT calculations. Again, for all the different parts, you might have a VAT inclusive amount and you've got to calculate the VAT exclusive and the VAT amount, etc. And then these 2 questions, 3.7 and 3.8 in your textbook, those are 2 good questions to practice your markup calculations and those other calculations, markup, VAT and gross profit. They practice all of those calculations. So those 3 questions, if you practice those until you can comfortably do them without looking at the solution and you understand what you're doing. Because remember, it's no good doing these questions by memory. You have to understand what you are doing so that when you are faced with a different scenario in the exam or in a question, your assignment, you can work out exactly what you should do. Very important for VAT is your VAT supply categories that you have to memorize for the exam. So that's very important, page 81. And then question 3.3 is a question that helps you to practice your VAT categories. Then part 3.5 in your textbook, source documents. And then again, you need the intro to inventory systems, page 69 for in this question. And then very important, in Learning Unit 5, there's a question there, question 5.2 on page 140. And in that question, part 3, they discuss settlement discount. They also in that question discussed the difference between settlement discount and trade discount, etc. And it is only in that question 5.2 in your textbooks where that information is discussed. So in other words, question 5.2 is actually a content question where they introduce you to that to those concepts. So see the solution on page 365. You actually need to study that. So question 5.2 is very NB. Then question 3.1 is a theory question, so make sure to reference this, and helpful sections in the textbook will be the sections on the creditors and debtors allowances journals. You'll find that on page 140 and page 142. I can't tell you much more than that in the session this evening without actually giving you the answer, so I've got to be careful of that. Then for question 3.2, you will refer to question 5.2 as I mentioned above, and that will help you with answering question 3.2. Remember, reference that. Then our question 3.3, creditors and creditors allowances journal. That's very interesting. What happened to the rest of my question 3? I definitely remember typing it. That's weird. I must have pressed something that deleted these. Sorry, I'm just talking to myself here. There was some other information on this question, but when I saved this or when I was working on it, I must have somehow deleted it. I'll go and just edit this for you as well. Okay, so question 3.3, creditors and the creditors allowances journals on page 140. That's what you need for question 3.3. Oh, okay, no, this is correct. Sorry. This is correct. Question 3.4, I couldn't give you any hints there without giving you the answer, so that you are going to have to work out yourself. And then also for question 3.5, it's only a 1-mark question, and I also can't give you any hints or tips there without giving you the answer. So 3.4 and 3.5, easy questions, 1 mark each. You'll definitely find that information. And I've just put a note here, see introducing journals on page 107. Would be a helpful place to go to for those last 2 questions, 3.4 and 3.5. Okay, so I actually really like this assignment. I really like the way it revises your first 4 learning units, asking you questions in a different way. So it's really getting you to apply that information now and not just copy it out of the textbook without understanding what you're doing. So then we come to the last question, 4, and this is on Learning Unit 6, Inventory Systems, which again, you haven't yet been tested. It's only an assignment to Learning Unit, page 185 in your textbooks. And also, just while I'm mentioning that, after Learning Unit 6, which is as far as assignment 2 goes, you only have 3 more learning units, which must then be covered for the exam. The Learning Unit 7 is, I would say, the longest learning unit and the one that will require the most time, and it's very important. And then salaries and wages, Learning Unit 8 is a fairly easy, it depends on, I know you guys aren't familiar with salaries and wages journals, but that's not a very difficult learning unit. And then also year-end procedures is all about practice, 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 making sure you understand what goes on in year-end procedures and just to practice those closing entries. But Learning Unit 7 is, from a time point of view, will take you the longest to cover. Okay, so sorry, that was just a little bit by the by. 3 more learning units to cover for your exams. So Learning Unit 6, last learning unit for this assignment. So this goes 4.1 to 4.4. Okay, so in general, for the first couple of questions, 4.1 and 4.2, you will have a look at inventory defined, page 186. So remember, we've already seen in Learning Unit 2, on page 69, they gave us that brief introduction to inventory systems. You must read that in conjunction with inventory defined on page 186. There's very important info they told us on the perpetual and periodic inventory systems here on page 69 that they don't repeat on page 186 because they're assuming that you already know that. And if you've forgotten this and you only look here on page 186, you'll be kind of like missing information and you'll be a bit confused. So that's why I've put both of these references here. And then also page 189 is an important page which is called perpetual for some, periodic for others. And then I've also just said that important for these questions, or for question 4, is your VAT categories, page 81. Super, super important section in your accounting 1A. Okay, so question 4.1 is for 3 marks in your own words explained, so you must reference that. And question 4.2, there are 2 different inventory systems for 2 marks. What are the 2 systems? And you're not really writing a paragraph, you're just naming things. So I guess you don't really have to reference that, although it's good practice to reference anything that's theoretical. Then we get to question 4.3, which is a practical question, and a question 4.4 is also a practical question. And for both of these questions, you will go to example 6.2 in Learning Unit 6, which starts at illustration 1 and goes all the way through, I think, up as far as illustration 10. This example 6.2 is absolutely critical for you guys to work through each of those illustrations, because what they do in that example is they show you for a particular transaction how you would complete that transaction in the general ledger if you were using the periodic system, and how you would complete it if it was the perpetual system. So each illustration contains perpetual inventory and the periodic inventory system, how you would enter those transactions into your journals. So example 6.2, super, very, very NB. But for question 4.3, you will, illustration 8 will be most helpful. And for question 4.4, illustration 6 will be most helpful. And then also markup calculations, as I've mentioned in previous questions, make sure you know where to access those. And please always go and revise your T accounts, in other words, our general ledger accounts, when they are in the T account format. That's on page 45, and that also you need to know that backwards, because in the exams as well, you are bound to get asked to complete at least several, I'm sure, general ledger accounts in the T account format. Okay, so those are all the places, very important sections that you need to go to. Don't forget your reference list and your / bibliography, and all page numbers, examples, and questions referred to in this lesson plan all come from your textbook. Okay, so now I'm going to just bring up the assignment document itself, question paper itself, onto the screen, so I can just go through the questions and just make sure that there's, if there is anything important that you need to pay attention to in the questions itself. Okie, wait for that to load. All right, make sure you've got the right assignment, right module code, right assignment paper, and that you've downloaded it in good time so that you're not rushing around at the last minute. Guys, I can't tell you, I could not believe it. A couple of weeks ago, one of the assignments was due for one of the modules, and it was due obviously at 9 p.m. to be uploaded, and I had a student messaging me at 6 p.m. asking me where he could find the question paper. So please do not be that student, because if you can't even find the question paper by 6 p.m., you have absolutely no chance of passing that, that assessment whatsoever. Okay, so I won't go through this every single one in absolute detail, but I just want to make sure that I highlight anything that's important, that you guys don't miss anything. So question 1, as we said, is 1.1 to 1.4. And that these first 3 questions are theory questions and they must be referenced. So as I always tell you guys, particularly for theory questions, please make sure that you pay attention to the number of marks allocated, because that is going to tell you how much information to give me on your question paper, how much to write. So this one over here is for 8 marks. They have asked you to list 4 users, ERS, and okay, so it's list is one verb and explain is a second verb. So there's 2 things that you need to do. So clearly, because they've asked for 4 users, there's going to be 2 marks allocated to each user, 1 for naming a user and the second mark for explaining why they would be interested in the financial information. Okay. Then again, here they are asking you just in a slightly different way to what you've done before, which really gets you thinking. List 2 questions. Okay, so and take note, questions that you think. So in other words, in your opinion, you are expected to understand the theory and then apply the theory so that you can come up with questions that you think investors would be asking themselves prior to deciding whether or not to invest in a business. Okay. And then 2 marks, in your own words, discuss the other branch of accounting. Remember, that is one of your learning objectives. That's easy enough. And then for 13 marks, we've got Starlight Traders as a gift shop in Joburg. They use the perpetual inventory system. So remember page 69, go and have a look. And that this is very important. In question 1.4, VAT can be ignored on all transactions, which means that we would assume that Starlight Traders is not registered for VAT and they do not purchase goods from any VAT suppliers. Okay, so in other words, VAT does not exist. So these amounts given here are all going to be VAT exclusive amounts, and you're not going to add VAT on, and you're not going to try and calculate VAT included in any of these amounts. You're just going to use these rand values given to you as is. Okay? No adjustments or calculations or anything necessary. Very important piece of information. We've got 5 transactions and you must analyze each of the above transactions. Okay, so you know about analyzing them under the accounting equation. And complete the table as follows. So here is an example that they've given us. So please always take note that when they give you an example, that you take good note to see, okay, here's the example, this is what the answer is supposed to look like, and then you do your 5 transactions in the exact same format. So as I was saying, the important thing is that account debited and account credited, the information that must go into these 2 columns is the name of the general ledger account that must be debited and the name of the general ledger account that must be credited. So again, go and refer to account names on that chart of accounts on page 53. That's the format that we are talking about. And then secondly, that under wherever you've entered the amount under assets, owners, equities, or liabilities, you see there is a minus 200 and a minus 200. You must indicate that plus or the minus in front of all those amounts that you write down. Okay. Here are these instructions. Please follow them. They don't write this down just to take up space on the paper. These instructions are how the marks have been allocated for the question. So this is 13 marks for question 1.4. And if you don't follow all of these instructions, you will be dropping some marks by the wayside. So our question 2 is 2.1 and 2.2. So this is the one I was explaining to you earlier. They have given you, so this over here, I would actually, how did I do that? I don't know why they've got balance or total there. I would head that column Just a second, let me get that. This is going to be rather large. Okay, account name, meaning general ledger account name. So they've given us the general ledger account debtors, the general ledger account bank, and so on. Okay, understand that clearly. On this question paper, they have suggested an element. So they have said debtors is a non-current asset, bank is a current asset, drawings is a proprietary account, etc. You have to decide, is this element description correct or incorrect? If you think it is correct, you are going to put a tick in the correct column. If you think it is incorrect, you are going to put a tick in the incorrect column. If you have ticked the incorrect column, only if you've ticked the incorrect column, you must then go and fill in this last column headed correct element what the element should have been. Okay. Is that clear? Please make sure you understand, because there are 10 marks here and I don't want you guys losing marks just because you've misunderstood what to do. Always, if you get busy with the assignment and you've got yourselves muddled up, just send me a message and I'll help you. That's what we're here for, is for answering questions. Okay, and then 2.2 is another very nice question where they've asked you in a different way. This is the one where they have given you what they have called an extract from the cash book receipts. So in other words, this is a cash book receipts with 5 transactions that have been filled in. Okay. They want you to draw up a table on your answer book with these headings here at the bottom: day, transaction description, source document, and original or duplicate. So as I've said to you before when we were going through the lesson plan, and I've shown you places that you can go and find that. So for this first one where it says on the 8th of February, cash was deposited into the bank account to the amount of 1380. This is, remember, this is always, this column is always the including VAT amount, bank column, including VAT. And debtors control will always be the including VAT amount. Then in the next column, we decide, does this amount include VAT? And if it does, we calculate, does this amount include VAT according to our VAT categories? And if it does, we calculate the amount of VAT and we put it here. And then the difference between the including VAT amount minus the VAT, we then put the excluding VAT amount, goes in whatever columns go on the right-hand side here. Okay. So they've completed all of these transactions and they want you to come up with a description for each of these transactions. In other words, describe the transaction, just like they describe transactions for you in the textbook. What is the source document that we would have used to enter this transaction into the cash book from? And that source document that we used, would it be an original source document or would it be a duplicate? So in this last column, you will write either original or you will write duplicate. Okay. And then our question 3, excuse me one sec. Our question 3, we've got question 3.1 through to question 3.5. So here again, always make sure you've got the details. Make sure you've got the details correct. They're a wholesaler. They purchase and sell goods for cash and on credit. Okay. They are a registered VAT vendor and they only transact with other VAT vendors, which means that whether you're purchasing or selling, VAT will be included in your transactions as long as VAT is applicable. In other words, it's a standard rated transaction from your VAT categories, and also that in your, if it was a purchase, that it is an allowable VAT. In other words, you're allowed to claim the VAT. It doesn't fall under the non-allowable category. List of transactions relating to the month of May. So again, they have given us 5 different transactions. We are using the perpetual inventory system. All goods are sold with a markup of 15% on cost. So remember, if the markup is on cost, that means we have got cost plus 15% equals a selling price that is 115% of cost. So in other words, our cost is 100%. We add 15% on to the cost in order to arrive at the selling price. So when we are looking at an amount, if we are looking at a sales price, that represents 115% or 115 parts. And if we want to calculate the markup, we want 15 of the 115 parts. And if we want to calculate the cost, we want 100 of the 115 parts. So 3.1, sorry, yes, 3.1, this is a theory question. They want you to, in your own words, remember also plagiarism, no copying allowed off websites or out of the textbook. You must always use your own words or paraphrase. That was for 4 marks. Make sure you write enough for 4 marks. And then also for 4 marks, what is the difference between a trade discount and settlement discounts? And how will these 2 discounts be accounted for? So when they say how will they be accounted for, what we want there, let me just double check the correct format of that answer. Yeah, that's all descriptions. So you will describe. So 4 marks, 2 marks for the trade discount, and obviously 2 marks for the settlement discount. For how will they be, what's the difference between them, and how will we account for them? Then 3.3, you need to, this is a practical question, you need to complete a creditor's journal and a creditor's allowances journal. So in this particular question, they have not given you column headings, but go and have a look at your creditor's journal structure in your textbook and use those column headings that you've got there. And remember, the transactions will always tell you what column headings you need. But just use the ones out of the textbook. I'm just quickly double checking here. Document day details folio, creditors, input VAT, and inventory. And under your creditors allowances journal, your columns will be document day details folio, creditors control, output VAT, and inventory. So go and you'll find those in your textbook, those 2 structures. And then these 2 are 1 mark questions that you'll just go and have to find that information in the textbook. It won't be too difficult. And then our last question, question 4, is quite a practical question where you have to do some general ledger T accounts. So the first couple of questions in your own words, 3 reasons why inventory is classified as an asset for 3 marks. So make sure that you give 3 separate different reasons so that you can get all 3 of the marks. And then there are 2 different inventory systems and you must name them for 2 marks. And then for question 4.3, where's my notes that I made? This is the question that you are going to use illustration 8 from example 6.2 to complete. They've given you a description here of a business. It is a registered VAT vendor, also only trades with registered VAT vendors, 15% VAT, etc. And then they describe a transaction. So transaction number 1, on the 1st of March, they sold goods for 15,000 Rand, excluding VAT, on credit to Mr. Neon, and goods are marked up 20% on cost. So again, it's 20% on cost. So it will be cost 100% plus 20% markup / profit equals a selling price, which is 120% of the cost. Your required is record that transaction in the applicable general ledger accounts. So all of the general ledger accounts that would be affected by that transaction, and there should be 5 of them, you are required to complete each one of those. So remember, this is going to general ledger account, means a T account, where we put the name of the general ledger account at the top, and on the left hand side we have got document date details amount, and on the right hand side we've got document date document details amount, not document folio, date folio details amount, and on the right hand side also date details folio amount. If you are going to debit the account, you'll put that details and the amount on the left hand side, and if you are going to credit the account, you'll fill in the details on the right hand side of the account. Remember your dead click rules, and I have given you those references in the lesson plan as well. And you must complete these general ledger accounts as if the company is using the perpetual inventory system, and you do not need to balance the accounts, which means you don't have to close them off at the end with the brought forward amount for the going forward to the next month. And then question 4.4, a second transaction. They should have said transaction number 2. I don't know. That's headed transaction number 1. So this is transaction number 2. The owner took goods for himself, his own personal use, that had a cost price of 5,000, excluding VAT, on the 1st of March. Required record this transaction also in the general journal using the periodic inventory system. So in the general journal means in the T account format, which general ledger accounts would be affected by this transaction, and write down the T account for them and complete them. Sorry, I'm going to just beg your pardon, I'm confusing you here. This is the general journal, not the general ledger. This one, transaction number 1, general ledger accounts, that's the T account. Let me just circle this in another color to highlight this. Okay, this is the general ledger, which is your T account. This one is the general journal. Okay, Did I give you the reference for general journals? Somewhere here. General journals are in your learning unit. 5, recording credit and sundry transactions. Sundry transactions are recorded in the general journal. So go and look in learning unit 5 for the correct format for the general journal. Remember, that's the journal. It's one of our subsidiary journals that we fill the journal in, and then we post from the journal into the general ledger. So it is one of our journals of original, what do they call it, original entry. And in your general journal, that's the journal that has got the column headings day, details, folio, and then it's got a debit column and a credit column. And each transaction is recorded one underneath each other, ruling off after each transaction has been entered in the general journal. Okay, here they said a narration is not required. Remember, the narration is that short description that we write down underneath where we've recorded which account gets the debit and which account gets the credit with the amounts in either the debit or the credit column. Underneath that, we put a short description of what the transaction is, and that's called the journal narration. You don't have to fill that in, and you also don't have to fill in the folio column. Okay, guys, so that is then a run through of your assignment. I'll post this recording for you tomorrow, as well as these documents. I'll put them up for you, and hopefully this has been helpful and will be helpful to those listening to the recording when you are busy completing your assignment. Remember, there's only 1 week to go. Today's Wednesday. Next Wednesday evening, the assignment has to be uploaded, so not a lot of time. So please get working on the assignment immediately, so that if you've got any questions whatsoever, you've got enough time to ask me, and I've got enough time to respond before that due date. Okay, any questions? Any questions at all? I hope I haven't talked too quickly. I try not to make the recording too long, because I know it's long to listen to, and hopefully that's been helpful. Awesome. Thanks, Emma. That's good. I hope it's been helpful. Okay, guys, so I'm going to finish the recording here, stop the recording.